Welcome back to the podcast all about energy, vitality and motivation. I'm Tony Wrighton, walking along the Thames in London on a lovely summer's day, just walking under the kind of tube bridge that crosses the Thames in this part of London. And it is a bit planes, trains and automobiles here. There's obviously a few planes still going because one of them is flying overhead as well. But it's a beautiful morning. The tide is out, there's lots of ducks. Very occasionally in this part of London we get a seal who luxuriates and sunbathes on the kind of muddy beach. It's fantastic, but the tide isn't quite far enough out for the seal today. But even if he was here, wouldn't really work on a podcast, would it? Anyway, this is Zestology. It's the podcast all about energy, and today's podcast was supposed to be going out in February or March. I recorded it ages ago with a friend of the show on Zestology, Sarah Knight. You will know Sarah from her sweary self-help titles, but after we recorded this podcast, we all know what happened next, and I kind of shelved it in favour of podcasts which firstly kind of dealt specifically with coronavirus. Then it felt kind of very appropriate to look at podcasts where we could kind of de-stress a little bit, and now I think is exactly the right time to present to you a podcast from the woman who wrote The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck. And also, she's written another one which has come out recently called Fuck No. And she's written another book called No Fucks Given. There's a theme developing, isn't there? You might have heard her on Zestology podcast before. She is brilliant. And she gives so little of a... You're getting my drift now. You're getting the idea. She gives so little of a fuck that she upped sticks and went to live in paradise with a dodgy internet connection. She moved house, moved country, moved to Central America. It's quite hard to track her down, but I did track her down, even though she doesn't live in her old fancy New York apartment and she gave up her job as a literary editor. She got a book deal instead, so she did pretty well. But I tracked her down for this interview. Now I have to say, because it's a dodgy internet connection where she lives, she got cut off before I could ask her favourite book at the end of the interview. You know, the question that I normally ask on this podcast about favourite book and one tip for living with more energy and vitality. But I've asked her that before, so if you want to listen to the other episodes where Sarah talks about that and her favourite books, then I will give you those numbers of episodes at the end of the show. You can listen to this first, see if you like it. If you do, you can listen to the other ones as well. So here she is, Sarah Knight on Zestology. Before we start, I need to let you know that next door they're doing some building work very inconsiderately right next to my recording studio, but in the spirit of your books, no fucks given. We're just going to get on with it.
Indeed.
This has now become an empire, hasn't it? When we first spoke, it was about 5 years ago, and you were just starting out. The first book was The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck, and then you did the TED Talk. But it's now a series of no fucks given guides. Congratulations. It's just, have you been surprised by how much it's captured the public imagination?
Thank you. Yeah, I worked in book publishing before I became an author myself, and so I consider myself extremely jaded and absolutely never expecting this kind of success. And we're now almost 5 years on with 5 books and 2 journals and another one that I'm working on right now. So it really is a mini empire.
Yeah, it is, and it must be so exciting for you to work on. I wonder, having worked, because were you an editor or a publisher?
Yes, I was a book editor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How often, in your world, in the world of editors, what do people slightly look down at the editor who wants to become a writer themselves?
I think actually a lot of people who work in publishing have ideas about becoming writers themselves. So more often than not, we're probably a little bit jealous of the people who go on to do it. I certainly was. I will cop to that. And my husband was just reminding me the other day of a former colleague of mine who sold a novel a couple years before I left publishing and sold my books, and how I'm not going to say the word jealous again, but how in awe of that I was, and how much I sort of wanted that to be me someday. And then it was. So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So you made the leap over to the kind of the more creative side. And how much now do you find is kind of, is it creative, and how much is it kind of marketing, and kind of getting the word out there and PR, and also I suppose doing things like this?
Well, really it's half and half, and I think that I gravitate toward social media. I like that kind of thing, but I do find it a little bit daunting to have to, create not just books, but also maintain a persona, and publicize myself and toot my own horn. And I'm sort of naturally inclined to do that. I think it's much harder for people who are wallflowers and who have no ego and who aren't used to that kind of thing. But it's a lot. It's a lot of work.
Well, let's talk about your latest one then. Fuck No, how to stop saying yes when you can't, you shouldn't, or you just don't want to. What was the inspiration behind this particular title?
Well, this one really came from the readers. So, as we said a few years ago, the first book came out, The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck. And that book is really focused on getting to know in your own mind, really understanding that it's okay to not want to do things, to not give a fuck about things, and to not give your fucks in the form of your time, energy, and money to things that don't make you happy. And, over the years, as I've written the other No Fucks Given guides, people keep writing to me and saying, some version of, I read your first book, I get it, I'm on board, I understand that it's okay not to give a fuck, but how do I say no to things? And so I realized that people were really looking for, the literal words to be put in their mouths. So that is how Fuck No was born.
Okay, and I know you divide people up into different categories, don't you? What categories are there, and what would I be?
So there are four major categories of yes men, and you have the people pleasers, the overachievers, the FOMOers, people who have fear of missing out, and just the pushovers. And so I don't know exactly which category you would fall in, but there is a quiz in the book called the Why Do I Say Yes All the Goddamn Time quiz. And that should help readers. That's a diagnostic tool for readers so that they can figure out why it is that they are saying yes when they really want to say no. And then the rest of the book explains how they can walk that back and go from yes, man to no, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean that's quite interesting. Just listening to your categories there. Well, I mean, without blowing my own trumpet, probably a bit of an overachiever, probably a little bit of a people pleaser. In that, I've always been quite kind of good at oiling the wheels of social interaction. Yeah, I probably don't like kind of putting people's hackles up that much. But you strike me as someone who genuinely walks the walk. You don't really care what people think of you. Is that fair to say?
That is entirely fair to say. I think that I used to care more, and it was probably still had its roots in me being an overachiever and really caring about what I did and what I accomplished and how I was seen through the lens of being an ambitious, successful person. So even back in the day, I don't think I cared quite so much what other people thought of me. It was just an extension of what I thought of me. And now I am cutting myself a lot more slack. So it's good all around.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, it's easier said than done though, isn't it? The thought that people kind of get a bad impression of you or don't think you've done a good job or, somehow come away with a negative point of view about you. I think we're quite hardwired because of our tribal background to not really like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not fun to sit around and think about the people who don't like you, but I like to try to put it in perspective, which is that, there are probably at any given time, 10 or 20 people in the world who don't like me and I don't even know them. They don't like me because they heard me on a podcast and they didn't like what I had to say, or they don't like me because they don't like curse words and they know me as that woman who writes books with fuck in the title. There are probably people who are like, current partners of my exes who don't like me through no fault of my own, So I feel like if you take the macro look at it and think, there's probably a bunch of people around who don't like me and there's nothing I can do about it. So why should I worry about the few people that I happen to know, that I have to see on a daily basis who I know don't like me? And also, like, you're allowed to not like people yourself. If the shoe is on the other foot, I mean, I'm sure there's people that you don't like, and
Yeah.
do you really want them to be concerned about it? Probably not. We
Yeah.
can just go about our separate ways, disliking each other.
So you mentioned FOMO a few minutes ago. What do you think of this concept of JOMO, the joy of missing out?
I love it. I love the joy of missing out. In fact, I wanted to call this book The Joy of No, but we needed to put a swear word in the title. So there is a little chapter called The Joy of No. But I personally don't experience FOMO too much, at least not in social settings. I'm very fond of my couch. I don't usually feel like I'm missing out on parties and fun stuff, although I do experience it in a work professional setting, which ties into my overachieverness. So I kind of separate out the concept of FOMO for different readers in a social and work setting. But for me, it's like, if you don't want to do something, like you don't want to go to a party, but you're afraid that you're going to miss out on something fun at the party, well, which feeling is stronger? And if the feeling of not wanting to go is stronger, then listen to it and don't go. And if you regret it later, then you can change your mind the next time. But I don't see any point in torturing yourself with this fear of missing out, and preventing yourself from enjoying the nice quiet night in that you theoretically preferred.
I've got this theory that JOMO is more important than ever before because there's just so many demands on our time and we're all so time strapped. It must be worse than ever because of the way that our work intrudes into our lives, and we're so busy and we've got so many social options. It really is important to switch off, do nothing, do less, and let the world plow on regardless.
Because it will. I mean, it's going to go on regardless of whether you're tuned into it or not. And, one of the biggest, central concepts behind all of my books is the idea of your fuck budget, which is your time, energy, and money. And you spend those things, according to what happiness you reap from them. And so I think that if people started thinking about their time and energy as thoughtfully as they often have regarded their actual money and their actual budget, then you would start to see exactly what you're talking about, how valuable that time is, and how, it makes more sense to reserve some of it just for us, whether it's for enjoyment, for doing something fun, or for not doing anything at all and just recharging.
Yeah, and it's time, and it's also it's thought, isn't it? I mean, this concept of thinking as bandwidth, which I've been just kind of mulling over recently. I had to renew something really a parking permit recently, and they said, actually, you need. Sorry, it's not just a question of filling out a form. You need to send us 2 of the proof of copies of identification from the first list and 1 from the second list, and proofs of car identity, and the whole thing's going to take an hour and a half. And the heart just sinks at the thought of, because you've actually really got to think about this thing to renew the parking permit. The problem is the joy of missing out. If I miss out on this one, then I'm going to break the law and I'm going to get a ticket for a lot of money. So I have to just get involved with it, unfortunately.
Well, I don't want to blow up anyone's spot, but I may or may not live with a person who ignored a jury duty summons once.
Oh my goodness.
In the United States. Now, we're not residents anymore, so I don't think they can come for him. But it was kind of unintentional. He just buried it in a pile of mail, and then the day had expired, and I was like, well, you have to go, you have to call, you have to get. And he was like, what happens if I don't do anything? And nothing happened. So
really,
in the past, we have each done our civic duty with pride, but that was a situation where I think there was quite a bit of joy of missing out.
Yeah. I must say, I wouldn't particularly recommend that course of action in ignoring things like parking tickets. I inadvertently ignored parking tickets, which actually got sent to a different property. And I had a knock on the door of my new property at 6 o'clock in the morning by 2 guys with bulletproof vests on. It was a fearful moment. And they basically just like spotted the bailiffs were out looking for me basically. And they would not let me go until I'd paid £800. And I did get it back eventually.
That is not the door knocker you want.
Yeah, I know. I did get it back eventually, but I did a lot of complaining, and it wasn't much fun at the time. So, yeah. Just interrupting this podcast for one moment to remind you that it is brought to you by Magnesium Breakthrough, my sponsors in July. Most supplements only contain 1 or 2 forms of magnesium, when in reality there are at least 7 that your body needs and benefits from, and that is where Magnesium Breakthrough come in. And I've been very excited to partner with them for the last couple of months. It is the ultimate magnesium supplement, and I've also been really pleased that quite a few of my friends have got in touch with me and said, I've got involved and purchased some. It's definitely the best that I've kind of seen or experienced with all 7 forms of this mineral. And in fact, it's been doing really well for the company that makes it, Bioptimizers, who I partnered with earlier in the year as well. If you're in the UK and you fancy 7 different types of magnesium in one little tablet, you can head to bioptimizers.co.uk and use the code Zestology10. So it's Bioptimizers with a Z, .co.uk. Use the code Zestology10. If you're in North America, go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology. It's a dedicated page just for me and Mag Breakthrough. So magbreakthrough.com/Zestology. On either site, use the coupon code Zestology10 and you'll be getting a nice little chunk off as well. It's the most effective magnesium supplement I've tried. It's definitely important in summer as well, when we're more likely to kind of be deficient in these minerals and we're sweating loads. And say goodbye to having 7 different bottles of magnesium to get the complete dose. So if you're in the UK, go to bioptimizers.co.uk and use the code Zestology10. If you're in North America, go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology. Now back to the show. But so the joy of missing out, and obviously, we've touched on the fact that you live in the Dominican Republic now. And that's a whole different level of missing out because it's probably quite a different pace of life there.
It is a wildly different pace of life, certainly from New York City, which is where I was for the 15 years before I moved to the DR. So yeah, it's pretty much a 180-degree turn.
Yeah, what's your life like now then?
Well, it's very relaxed. It's muy tranquilo, as we say here. But it also means that you can't have everything that you want at every time of the night or day like you could in New York City. So, you have to know what's open, when places are open, when certain proprietors are on vacation and you won't be able to get what you need. So you have to go now because they won't have it for 2 weeks. There's a lot of sort of planning involved in this lifestyle. But then also there are just kind of hilarious situations like this past weekend, there were supposed to be national elections. And so everything was shut down. No bars and restaurants could sell alcohol. No grocery stores could sell alcohol from Saturday morning at 6 a.m. through Monday morning at 6 a.m. And the elections were supposed to be held on Sunday. And everybody battened down the hatches and we all went to the grocery store a couple days ahead of time. And all the poor tourists who were in town, because it's a holiday in America, so there were a lot of American tourists in town, didn't know what to do with themselves. Traffic was crazy. And about noon on Sunday, they actually called off the elections because of some computer glitch in the voting system. So, you make all of these plans to work around the ridiculousness of this country and how it prepares for mass events like an election, and then they just cancel it midday anyway. So there were people taking pictures of the tape being cut off of all of the liquor shelves at the grocery store on Sunday afternoon. And we were back in business.
You were back, thank goodness. I presume you'd stocked up for the weekend though, just in case.
Yeah, we were all set in that household. Yeah. We don't go too far without a bottle of Prosecco and so.
Good. But I mean, I think that's quite interesting in terms of your life in the Dominican Republic. The joy of missing out. I have found recently, and we were very lucky to go on a kind of winter vitamin D break in the last month or so. But if you're staying somewhere with a good internet connection, or a half good internet connection in your case, because you've already been cut off once, it can still be the case that you can be in paradise, but actually you just kind of get sucked into a kind of online vortex where you're checking your WhatsApps and your Facebooks and your download figures or whatever it might be, and you're not actually in the moment enjoying yourself. I suppose that's what I mean by the joy of missing out. For me, it has to involve switching off at the same time.
Yeah, I do actually sometimes just literally say the words out loud. Sarah, walk away from the phone.
Yeah.
Because partly what we talked about earlier, the fact that I have to maintain this online persona and I have to, market myself and my books. And so I am required to be online, to be posting on Medium, to be on Instagram, to be documenting things by links, all of that stuff. And so sometimes I can sit down with my morning coffee in order to just kind of update my social feeds, and then I look up and 2 hours have passed, and that's not good. And last night, in fact, when I was trying to go to sleep, I was looking at Twitter, and the American political landscape right now is it's just infuriating, and
Yes.
they're, every day, every minute of every day it gets worse. And I just said, Sarah, oh my God, stop looking at it. You got to put the phone down, because you can not only waste so much time, but you can try to put too many things in your brain at once and cause, a fuse to blow. So I do think it's important to disconnect.
Yeah. I think you mentioned Trump a little bit in your book, don't you?
A little bit. I may have been a little preoccupied. The last two books that I've written may have been
I
may
think
have
we
been
spoke
some
about
expressions
politics.
of
Yeah. But I mean, I think we spoke about politics the last time. The problem is, if you're kind of quite politically engaged, it's hard not to get sucked in and angry and just kind of a little bit obsessed by it all, isn't it?
It is difficult. And when I feel that anger and rage coming on, I try to channel it into something positive. Not everybody has the means to donate to campaigns. Not everybody has the time to phone bank and do things like that. But I try to do that because I feel like otherwise I'm going to poison myself with my own rage. And that's
Yeah.
not productive for anybody.
Yeah. That's quite a nice way of looking at it. So you're getting involved in the Democratic primaries then?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a very crowded field, and it's really hard to tell who's going to come out ahead. And there are a lot of candidates that are flawed, and so we shall see who rises to the top. I have my favorites.
Who?
Well, Elizabeth Warren is my top choice.
Yeah.
I'm still very angry at Bernie Sanders for what I perceive to be his role in dragging the Hillary campaign down last time around when he already didn't have the nomination. But I will vote for him if I have to.
Okay.
And I really like Pete Buttigieg too. And I know that some people have issues with him on his record on race, and I have been listening to them, and I am hoping that he is listening as well. But those are just a few of the front runners. It's really anybody's game at this point. So
yeah. So, I mean, you are obviously very engaged, and you've completely alienated all of the Republicans and half of the Democrats in the last few minutes, which is excellent. And it is.
I do what I can.
Yeah. It is hard to say no, isn't it? To put the phone down, to walk away from the phone, to walk away from the computer. What are some of the other things that you mentioned in your book? I mean, where we should be saying no, and we should be becoming a lot better at saying no. I mean, stuff like working more, for example, or because I mean, the lure of an extra shifts pay can be quite tempting where you think, it's only one evening, it's only one of my 2 days off kind of thing. But that's probably the kind of thing that you might talk about in terms of saying no.
Yeah, I mean, well, honestly, if you want and can use the money, then go ahead and say yes. But I think that you stop working for no extra money. I mean, this is something that a lot of people were writing into me about because I did an anonymous survey to kind of build up some questions and answers for the new book. And a lot of people were saying, that I keep getting asked to stay late, not being paid overtime, get asked to take on extra projects without being paid more, get asked to do colleagues' work who are failures, but not get paid commensurately. And those are the kinds of things that I think you have to be able to say no to. And I give examples in the book of how I've done that in the past and how, yes, it is scary. It's terrifying. Your heart is in your throat. What if I get fired for saying no? And most of the time, if you can say an honest, polite, productive, diplomatic no, it's going to be okay. We've all worked for awful, horrible bosses, and maybe those awful, horrible bosses will not take it well and will penalize you. But you'll never know until you try. And I don't want anybody to walk away thinking, wow, she's fine with me getting fired on the spot if I just take her advice. Just that's not usually how it works. Usually people go, oh, I thought I was going to be able to push, guilt, manipulate you into that. and I'm not. I'll go do that to somebody else instead.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, because obviously your books, there's a message and they're also great fun as well. But on a serious note, when it's a boss or even, a family member, when you do start pushing back and saying, no, actually, it's really important to do that. It's boundaries. It's better for them and for you as well. But I suppose often those people close to you might not like it when you start to assert those boundaries.
Yeah, and I think especially with family, people get worried. They have a lot of, deep state guilt and obligation going on with their family members. And what I try to explain really clearly in all of my books, but especially in Fuck No, is that all healthy relationships thrive on boundaries. Okay, these are important and necessary, not just for you, but for the people that are on the other side of the boundary. And a lot of the times the guilt is coming from your own head. And if you can talk yourself out of it by putting yourself in the other person's shoes and saying, hey, if they didn't make them feel guilty, no, because I'm a reasonable person who understands that not everybody can do everything that's asked of them every day of the week. So if you look at it that way and you think, no, this is a reasonable no, I would accept this no from the person on the other end, then that might help you get to saying your own no. And then when you do say it, you might be very surprised that a lot of people will just take it. If they don't, I give kind of a gradated way of dealing with people who push back, which is natural. Oh, are you sure you can't come? Oh, we'd love to have you there. Yeah, I'm sure. I know I'd love to be there. You can just parrot it back to them, and usually that ends the conversation. They push a little harder. There are other tactics you can use. And then if somebody, particularly a family member, really wants to lay on that guilt trip, you can say to them, I really think that your inability to take no for an answer says more about you than it does about me. And I have had to whip that out a couple of times, and it does stop people in their tracks. But you know what? That boundary is set for life at this point. And there might be some uncomfortable moments, but if you can really just very honestly say, you are not understanding what I am telling you, and the fact that you will not accept it is really something that you need to work on, not something that I need to work on, can be a wake-up call for certain friends and family members. And it's worth doing if you want to have another 10, 15, 20, 30, or 50 years of fun and fruitful relationships with these people.
Yeah, because I totally agree with that. And I think that the word boundaries can sometimes seem to be like, for a British audience, it might sound a bit like kind of Americanized and perhaps even a little bit kind of hippy dippy. But it's really quite life changing when you start to assert what you want and what you don't want with the people around you. And a lot of people don't do that. And that's presumably when you're people pleasing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I feel very strongly that people can be trained. And this is something that, just going from a corporate working world to a freelance one, I was pathologically responsive to emails because I demanded it of myself and certain bosses demanded it of me. And as I've gone along in life, I've realized that the more emails you send and the faster you send them back, the more you're going to get. And the fuller your inbox is going to be and the more tied to your computer you're going to be. And I don't do anything as standardized as like, well, I only respond to emails on Mondays between 12. But I did really start actively slowing my response time, not responding to certain aggressive people, nearly as often or as at length as I might otherwise have, and have slowly trained people to not expect to hear from me immediately so that I have a day's grace period so that when I am off at the beach, for 6 hours, I don't have to feel bad that I'm not on top of my inbox. And, those little kinds of things, you can do the same thing with your family and your terms of training them to respect your boundaries.
That's it. Thank you to Sarah. As I said, slightly dodgy internet connection and Sarah got cut off just towards the end of the podcast. But I have asked her before about her favourite book and her favourite tip for living with energy and vitality. And if you want to listen to that, then she's been on episodes 48, 92 and 119. But it has been about 3 years since I've had her on Zestology, so it's great to have her back. 48, 92 and 119. Next week on Zestology, the podcast entitled Biohacking and Frozen Veg. Why is this podcast called Biohacking and Frozen Veg? You'll just have to tune in next week and find out. Quick reminder that this podcast is brought to you by Magnesium Breakthrough. If there is one mineral you should be worried about not getting enough of, it is magnesium. Most supplements only contain 1 or 2 forms of magnesium, but Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7. So you have to buy 7 different pots of magnesium. You can just get 1 or 2 pots. And you might be able to hear a lot of runners jogging past me. It's been very much jogging central around here over the last few months since the whole virus thing and people not being able to go to the gym. And if you're doing a lot of physical exercise, you probably are losing a lot of magnesium, and you might want to look into supplementing with the same supplement that I use, Magnesium Breakthrough. I've actually been using all sorts of magnesium supplements for years, and it really helps with my sleep. But this one is a good one. It's the ultimate magnesium supplement, easily the best that I've kind of experienced. All 7 forms of magnesium, and if you're in the UK, you can go to bioptimizers.co.uk and use the code Zestology10. So if you're in the UK, go to bioptimizers.co.uk, use the code Zestology10. And if you're in North America, go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology, where there are some excellent deals on there. Okay, so magbreakthrough.com/Zestology. If you're in anywhere else in the world, you'll see a picture of me on that page as well. And a little bit more about magnesium, a couple of good videos as well. It's a good page, that. So use the coupon code Zestology10 whenever you buy Magnesium Breakthrough, and you'll get a little chunk of change off. Thanks for listening. See you next time.